South of the European continent, a group of islands emerges in the Mediterranean, near the Iberian Peninsula, the Balearics. They form an ensemble made up of 4 principal islands. 2 of them constitute a totally separate entity. Ibiza is the 3rd largest of the Balearic Islands. It is accompanied by its smaller and surprisingly flat neighbour, Formentera. A number of tiny islets are sprinkled here and there between these 2. All these islands are actually the peaks of an underwater mountain chain. Ibiza and Formentera belong to an archipelago known since antiquity under the name of Pitiusas, a term invented by the Greek sailors when they drew alongside these very green isles. Pitiusas in ancient Greek denotes an island covered with pines. Coniferous trees still abound, but they share the land with other vegetation typical of Mediterranean flora. The wildlife of the Pitiusas would be very sparse if it weren't for wild birds who make their stop here in great numbers during their seasonal migrations. Since 2000 BC, the islands have served as an intermediary stop for several cultures. The Phoenicians preceded the Carthaginians, and very quickly successive populations sought protection from foreign threats. Fortifications began appearing from the Middle Ages. In 1983, the Balearics became a self-governing Spanish community, 3 years before Spain became part of the European Union. North Africa is relatively close. The Muslim influence has made itself felt, even in the traditional habitat. The limestone walls have earned Ibiza the nickname White Island. Population shifts were first limited to the Mediterranean Sea, but after the fall of the Roman Empire, people from German origin added their lighter coloring to the physiognomy of the Mediterraneans. Around 40 years ago, Ibiza experienced a wave of immigrants due to a movement born in the United States during the Vietnam War. These expatriates challenged the established order and advocated moral freedom. With their long, unruly hair and pacifist ideologies, these hippies brought their taste for Eastern philosophies and products derived from their craft industry. The hallucinogenic substances offered a different view of the world, providing psychedelic nuances. The community spirit of the hippies and their sense of celebration attracted numerous followers, a state of mind actually found in local traditions. North African influences are very visible, especially in how people dress. They became even stronger after the island of Ibiza had converted to Christianity. Most of the churches didn't appear until the 18th century. The original forest has receded everywhere due to agriculture, as the island's landscape confirms. Despite new techniques and intensive farming methods, the agricultural sector ensures only 1 tiny % of the gross domestic product. In 700 BC, Ibiza already had a port. Its deep waters enabled heavy ships to approach without difficulty. Today, the boats come from all over the Mediterranean basin. Ibiza lacks natural resources, and supplying the island with drinking water is a recurrent problem. And yet the island has experienced a boost of vitality from its international airport, for example. The infrastructures are able to receive significant numbers of passengers. If we add the number of visitors in a single year, you'd have to multiply the local population by at least 40. From the 1960s, Ibiza's notoriety grew. Land along the coast was cheap, so the coastline was quickly transformed to welcome those seeking rest and relaxation. Open-mindedness and hospitable shores, you didn't need more to create a phenomenon. Some believed it would be a passing fad, but the success continued, and tourism today is by far Ibiza's leading industry and main source of wealth. Ibiza's proportions are harmonious. The island is 40 kilometers long by 20 kilometers wide. Ibiza, the main town, was established on a site overlooking the Mediterranean. Its harbour has been known since early antiquity. The neighbouring hills shelters it from the strong coastal winds. The town was often the victim of pirates in the course of its history. Turkish and Moorish vessels raided and pillaged the town. But times have changed. Today the port is active with pleasure boats. The port of Ibiza hasn't always been this prosperous. After the discovery of America, the Mediterranean ports gradually declined, leaving a good number of sailors out of work. So they were hired as privateers to serve other countries. Privateers were mercenaries authorized to attack merchant ships from enemy lands, not to be confused with pirates that the town tried to drive back. In the mid-16th century, Charles V of Spain himself decided to have a stronghold built. The cathedral caps Dult Villa, the old city. To penetrate it, you must get over the rampart, whose design dates back to Arabic times. Begun in the 13th century, the Catholic building was erected over the site of an ancient mosque. Considering Ibiza's tropical location, it is rather surprising to find the cathedral dedicated to Saint Mary of the Snows. Why? Simply because on August the 5th, the Saint's Day, the Spanish overthrew the Muslims after 300 years of occupation. For the Catholic population, the gateway to heaven was once again open. The Archaeological Museum offers a striking plunge into the island's history. It houses a collection of clay statuettes of Carthaginian origin. These objects, both commemorative and symbolic, probably express thanks to a divinity. Most of Ibiza's great historical periods are represented by precious relics. From the Greek vases to the statues of notable Romans, the sworn enemies of the Carthaginians, the island's entire past resurfaces after centuries of oblivion. At the foot of the ramparts is nestled the Sa Peña neighborhood. The old fisherman's quarter clings to the hill that dominates the sea. The brilliant whitewashed walls and houses, closed to the outside world, are reminders of Muslim society. Peña means rock in Spanish. The quarter owes its name to the layout of the spot. Lacking space, the homes are on top of one another and rise up to catch the light. The slope is hard work for the inhabitants, but despite the steep terrain, the street is a perfect meeting place. Laundry can dry even in the shade, thanks to the sea air that circulates constantly. In 1991, the town took the name of Ibiza, the Catalan name of Ibiza. People on the island actually speak a Catalan dialect. A poet-priest, descending from the slaves, was one of the most ardent defenders of the local language. Isidore Maccabic I Obet. The new town extends well beyond the ramparts. Lining the wide avenues, the middle class of the 19th century lived in these opulent dwellings, remarkably restored today. The decorations are typical of the transition between Art Nouveau and Art Deco. Drawing his sword, a native son, killed during the Spanish-American War at the end of the 19th century, General Barra de Rey. The tranquility of Ibiza conforms perfectly with its patrimony, evidence of a certain way of life. The walls that still hold the town's past are constantly subjected to culture shock. As soon as you reach the beach, though, life takes on a totally different look. Proportions change, the tones are more intense, even the rhythm changes. Day and night, without respite, people party. It never stops, from dusk till dawn, from dawn till dusk. Further south, life becomes more tranquil as you follow the jagged coastline. The fragile limestone has formed hundreds of coves where it is easy to find refuge. Those who have partied too much find well-deserved rest. The utterly exhausted can count on expert hands to work their magic. You make good resolutions and take up sports, yet the respite is short-lived, as partying will quickly resume. The Romans also had a flair for parties. To take a break, it's best to leave the coast and head inland. In summer, the vegetation has difficulty tolerating the implacable sun. Yet the temperature remains pleasant in Ibiza thanks to the wind. The sun and the wind have contributed to the creation of the salt marshes, already exploited by the Carthaginians. Ibiza used to be called Salt Island. Today, the salt marshes constitute a natural reserve, and the rich ecosystem has been declared a protected zone, especially for birds. The methods of exploitation have hardly changed. Before, farmers used to collect the salt after the harvest, and they shared the profits. Difficult work carried out in the heat of July. Since antiquity, the salt from Ibiza has been renowned for its purity. Its marshes are among the largest of the Mediterranean. In the crook of a bay at the extreme south of the island, the fishermen seem timeless in the small village of Sa Canal. Fishing has long been the only resource, along with farming. The two activities are often conducted at the same time in the coastal villages. Depending on the season, families change profession. Fishing has thus remained on a small scale in Ibiza. The boats have been reduced to the simplest models and rarely venture far from shore. Along the entire south coast, Ibiza reveals its jagged contours. The limestone rock appears particularly bare here. Limestone has a weak resistance to salt water, and the seawater is saltier than normal in the Mediterranean, which is particularly enclosed and shallow, and which has significant evaporation. The sea is also capable of isolating entire sections from the coast. A superb example of this is found in the southwestern part of the island. The rock Es Bedra culminates at 382 meters above the waves. Between the huge rocks and the coast, the ocean's currents can be violent, and the wind stirs the water's surface. The wind hasn't prevented the construction of sumptuous villas. Most have been inspired from the traditional habitat in the Mediterranean. The geometric forms, white present everywhere, and the sense of volume have influenced several great modern architects. You don't have to venture far to enter into another universe. Here, the luxury villas and techno music would be out of place. In the countryside, daily life remains the same, as it has been for hundreds of years. The land produces the essentials, the rest is superfluous. A philosophy of existence shared by the hippies when they first came here. The two worlds, with nothing in common, have lived in mutual respect. Even the trees have adapted to the new fads. At the heart of the San Josep mountain range, we reach Sa Talaya, the highest point of Ibiza, at 475 meters, with an unrestricted view of the south coast. On a clear day, you can make out the Spanish coast, 80 kilometers in the distance. On the western facade of the island, Saint Anthony de Portmany. To show that the best ideas are always the simplest, navigator Christopher Columbus succeeded in making an egg stand vertically. The town has displayed this same practical sense to give itself a boost of energy. The village has changed enormously. The seniors barely recognize it anymore. The old Roman fishing port, Porto Magnus, has actually been turned into a permanent youth center.
Let me tell you one more time. Let me tell you one more time. Let me tell you one more time. Let me tell you one more time.
As the last light of day slowly fades, take some time to enjoy the sunset. But this quiet moment is short-lived. The music is too tempting. You quickly fall under its spell. You grow accustomed to it almost immediately and get to know the regulars.
I am famous because I am the best pirate you ever met. My boat is the most beautiful.
The old sea dogs and artists gather to celebrate the last of the day's rays. Night may fall in Saint Anthony de Portmany, but the party continues. Towards the center of the island, the forest has difficulty warding off the assaults of terrace cultivation, growing in waves. To sustain terrace cultivation and delimit the plots of land, but also to protect them from the wind, kilometers of low stone walls have been erected. In the hamlet of Balafia, the stones have also been used in the construction of towers. The inhabitants used to take refuge there during the time of pirate attacks. The rural architecture of Ibiza has become a reference. In the Ibicenco style, the house is a combination of white cubes. reduced openings and flat roofs, adapted from Moorish architecture. But this is Christian soil, and the littlest village boasts a chapel. Painted onto the limestone, the 3 crosses recall the death of Christ, tortured along with 2 thieves. The clayey land is dry but fertile. It is comprised of alluvial deposits and marine sediments. At the base of the tomato plants, humidity is maintained by covering the ground. Tomatoes have adapted well to the island. One of the species, in fact, has been christened the Ibiza. The tomato was first used for its decorative virtues. It wasn't originally from the Mediterranean. It arrived in the 16th century from South America. Even if the yields are poor, farming is one of the oldest human activities on the island. The Romans were already cultivating the earth. Older still, the vine was imported by the Phoenicians, who traded wine. The vineyard produces a full-bodied wine typical of soil bathed in abundant sunlight. The lines and the contrasts, the reliefs and the textures have attracted numerous artists to Ibiza. The walls are like canvases on which colors spread naturally. Antonio Prats Palbet is a painter and patiently plays with his palette to find all the shades of the island.
The light in Ibiza is truly special. It's very intense, for one thing. Plus, there's the scenery that's very important for us. And obviously, we have the sea that always softens the landscape. All this together represents the island.
And there's everyday life.
It's a painting that depicts the island very well. It shows fishermen selling their catch.
Or this one.
And this one represents a group of farmers who are obviously off to a party or to Mass.
At San Miquel de Balançat, this 14th century church is dedicated to the Archangel Michael. It is used as a set for a traditional dance, the Ball Pages Farmer's Ball. The musical instruments haven't changed. The rhythm is punctuated with the castagnettes. Enormous castagnettes made of juniper. The women seem to glide over the ground. With tiny steps, they move to the melody of an oleander flute accentuated by a pine drum. The men skip and jump about to seduce their companions, who make fun of them. They wear the emprendada, a collection of necklaces. Some of the chains are gold. There are several versions of the dance, varying in the number of petticoats worn. Crossing the rolling hills in a northeasterly direction, we reach a small village, in every respect much the same as the others. San Carlos de Peralta, the same whiteness, same visitors, same laid-back ambiance. In theory, this town should have remained quiet, as it had long been just a place to pass through. But the arrival of the hippies, who chose the spot as the showcase of their philosophical convictions and their handicrafts, changed all that. At the Las Dahlia market, where every imaginable form of art is displayed, the hippies and their emulators retrace a course that has led them as far as India, to the origins of Buddhism. In the 1960s, the hippies made and sold their handicrafts at the market, where people admired their talent. Today, the pieces are no longer made here, but on the Asian continent. As for the ambiance and the entertainment, things haven't changed all that much.
Per questo dito qua. Sono lacrime d'amore perché. E voilà!
The manual work, the rallying signs, the prolonged meditation, it's all there.
Here we call this the little hippie market of Las Dahlia, because we are authentic hippies. It's the meeting place for the hippies of San Carlos. Being a hippie means to appreciate life in a very natural way. For example, here in Ibiza we have clean, pure air, a lot of sunshine, and an active social life. It's thanks to the hippies that we have all this atmosphere.
For the hippies, the island of Ibiza was just one step. Flower power would take them much further. Many remained, however, because of the climate, and especially because the natives tolerated their very personal viewpoints. Some still practice a decorative technique on fabric, originating from Indonesia. Before dyeing the fabric, some parts are coated with wax.
Esto es el batik.
This is batik. I've been doing it myself for more than 20 years here in Ibiza. I came here in 1976, and this is the same batik the hippies of that period were doing.
The old hippies have been integrated for a long time into consumer society and the sales circuits. Some have even been extremely successful. Today they own a thriving business on the island, light years away from their old ideals. In San Juan de la Bridge, as in many other villages, flower power has influenced the lifestyle and way of thinking. Not only have the islanders respected the hippies and their principles, but they have assimilated their tastes, regarding decoration, for instance. Between the two worlds, the fusion may not be total, in fact far from it, but the result of cohabitation is interesting. June the 24th, the Festival of St. John, one of the most important dates on the local calendar. According to tradition, the Festival of St. John is accompanied by bonfires. It marks the summer solstice, the shortest night of the year. Suddenly, impressive cliffs rise on the north coast. Access roads are rare, except on the San Miquel side. Since antiquity, the mooring here has been known for being well protected from the wind. The rocks and shallow waters never seemed to bother the Turkish pirate ships that plundered the coast from the 14th century. So great was the threat that the islanders erected watchtowers to alert one another of attacks. Near the beach of San Miquel, the limestone rock is hollowed out with deep excavations. The Cova de San Marça has been open for around 100,000 years. Smugglers have been accumulating treasures here for a very long time. The limestone is dissolved by runoff, which seeps through from the surface. When the water flow is weak, the limestone particles accumulate to form the stalactites on the roof and the stalagmites on the floor. From the other side of the cave, the beach of Beniras. At the crook of a perfect curve, the wind gently blows, just enough to refresh the bathers on the beach. At the water's edge, the fishermen in their pontoons see the whole show. The lighthouse of Portinache points to the north end of the island. The islanders strive to maintain the traditional architecture in the construction of new residences along the coast. In fact, a law was passed in 1991 which now protects 60% of the coastline. The beaches alternate with calas cut into the rock, spots where the water level sharply rises. Not far from one beach, in the village of Escanar, is where the oldest hippie market on the island is found. Even if the articles have lost their authenticity, the stalls still attract clients and the public keeps coming. There's something for everyone, provided that every purchase carries the essential Ibiza label. In reality, the market concept has somewhat evolved.
This is the hippie market. The name comes from a time when the hippies had started a modest market. Then people began traveling. They brought back more and more things. The craft industry grew over time. But in truth, I think this market has become very commercial. On the other hand, you still find objects here from India and elsewhere, and people from different countries have a chance to meet.
The hippies themselves never could have imagined such success. One of the most alluring bays of Ibiza wraps around Santa Eulalia de Rio. On the east coast, Rio means river in Catalan, a river that flows into the bay when it isn't dried up. On the Puig de Missa, the peak of the Mass, from the 16th century, a fortified church used to take in large populations at the time of Moorish attacks. The thickness of the walls gives some idea of how much the people dreaded the Muslims. Below, a museum of local ethnology has taken over a former farmhouse. A rather eclectic collection comprises the inventory of the different traditional activities and objects from the entire Pitiusas archipelago. From the beginning of time, artisans have used their expertise to transform materials. Each object has a specific purpose. Glass is wrapped in rope to protect it from breakage, and perishable goods are conserved by drying them. Between the local cheese and the pressing of olives, the museum depicts everyday life as well as festivals in Ibiza. A living museum that retraces the island's past, its peaceful and troubled times. The Santa Eulalia Bay nearly lost all its charm due to development plans in the 1970s. Fortunately, the promoters ended up adopting a more compromising approach. Close to the town hall in Spanish Square, people take time to enjoy life on the shaded terraces. A lovely summer day. The crowd gathers at the end of the afternoon to get the best seats for an eagerly expected event. Daylight is replaced by artificial lighting. Let the fashion show begin. Ibiza developed its own style in clothing over 30 years ago. It's known as ad lib, an abbreviation of the Latin ad libitum, which means according to one's pleasure. With a lot of white and a hint of provocation, the ad-lib creations evoke the light of the island and the purity of its forms. Inspired by the hippies, this lightness has transcended years and generations. Leaving Ibiza, the boat is the only means of transport to reach the other major stop on the hippie route. Joined to Ibiza by shallow waters, it is the most southern and smallest of the inhabited Balearics, Formentera. Totally flat, the island's highest point reaches 200 meters above sea level. The geological constitution of the island is the same as that of its neighbor, a limestone block worn away by erosion. The boat coming from Ibiza draws alongside La Savina. This town owes its name to the salt marshes nearby. They have been one of Formentera's main resources. The buildings respect the island's profile and are limited in height. The name Formentera could come from the Latin Frumentaria, which means land of wheat. The cultivated fields encircle the administrative center, San Francesc de Formentera. Far from the influence of the continent, the first church wasn't built until the 18th century. An isthmus of 5 kilometers links the two extremities of the island. The long, narrow sandbar is bordered with well-protected beaches. The rocks that dot the water's surface keep the boats at a distance. Bathers, meanwhile, can endlessly enjoy the crystal clear waters. There are no overpopulated beaches, as Formentera has understood the need to protect itself. No obstacle mars the island's surface. Because of the total absence of hills, the wind is able to blow without restraint. To counter it, islanders have erected low stone walls, often embellished with prickly pear. The only mill left is too old and worn out to continue turning. The wind has grazed the island, as flat as the horizon, but one exception breaks the horizontal lines, the lighthouse of La Mola. Another hypothesis is offered by those interested in the origin of the name Formentera. The island is a promontory, which could be derived from the Latin term promontorium. The promontory is colonized by birds. To camouflage themselves, their feathers blend in with the rock. The seagull takes advantage of the ascending currents to fly off. Despite its steep cliffs, Formentera has always been vulnerable. Although it has been inhabited since 2000 BC, it was abandoned for long periods of time due to its insecurity. At the western extremity of the island, a church illuminates the village of El Pilar de la Mola. The hippies have also settled in Formentera. The reduced size of the island has made it easy to do business and has helped the hippie culture to survive. Formentera has always steered between sky and sea. By taking care of itself, the island will continue to float without effort among the silvery jewels. To head back towards Ibiza, you have to cross right through the island before reaching Saint-Antoine-de-Portmany on the west coast. A spectacular show is just about to begin. Since the end of the afternoon, people have been rushing to get front row seats. Each day, the show is identical, but it's always a huge success. The spectators are patient. They know that under no circumstances will the director let them down. The show cannot be postponed. Gradually, the sun, the superstar, colors the horizon with warmer and warmer shades. The boats become silhouettes. The sun descends. The vivid colors soften. And finally, the ball of fire fades. Satisfied, the public applauds. Later into the evening, in Ibiza, other shows and festivities are underway. The streets of the old town progressively become livelier. The night is just beginning. Best to conserve your strength. It's going to be a long party. The night owls begin to appear. The spectators get warmed up to prepare for the celebration. In a group of friends or all alone, people come to have a good time.
Just for the weekend, holiday, beach party, fun time.
Why? Because it's a nice place, beautiful people, all the day, sun, it's just nice.
Everyone loves Ibiza, no doubt about it, even if some folks prefer to remain incognito. In the crowd, the thought is the same.
Ibiza #1.
You don't go unnoticed by walking on tiptoe. As the evening progresses, the crowd increases. One o'clock in the morning, on Virgin Street, the actors of the late night show parade, the ambience increases. The most extravagant characters provide a great sales pitch for the trendy nightclubs.
Welcome to America, the one and only.
3 a.m., time to decide where to go. Just have to climb the steps and dive into the throng and the music. The crowd, the light, and the rhythm blend together. José Rosello Prats has been familiar with the beat of the nightlife for a long time.
In the 1960s, when Ibiza wasn't yet known, people who'd fled the Korean and Vietnam Wars came here. They were fugitives, Americans who fled their country to avoid going to war. They settled in Ibiza, and they formed a community. They lived in peace here, quietly. They brought us music we didn't know. In Spain, at that time, music was a sort of state monopoly. So this foreign music opened new horizons, and Ibiza has become assimilated to this musical world. And since then, we've been developing our own style of Ibiza music.
Partying knows no limits in Ibiza. In fact, the island itself has no limits. Even the land seems to go on forever into the sea. Ibiza, a feast of senses.